All right, welcome to Real Outdoors. Captain Adam here, Captain Jeremy on the other side. We're excited to be in Stevensville, Michigan today, and we have a great group of guys and some great topics. So,
Hi, I'm Matt Wing from Lakavea Sport Fishing Team. Our home port is Grand Haven, Michigan.
I'm Captain Jerry Link. I run 36 Tierra out of St. Joseph, Michigan, and I run Originator Sport Fishing Charters year-round.
So let's do a little conversation about tournament strategies, pre-fishing strategies. How do you prepare for your tournament weekend? What's that dates leading up? What's your approach? So Matt, you want to give us
a
little insight?
Kick it off. Our strategy for pre-fishing probably isn't quite as elaborate as some of the other boats, especially the pro boats that are charter boats that are out fishing possibly every day of that week leading up to a tournament. We've gotten to the point where it's Friday, maybe Thursday, and our strategy on that Friday is eliminating water. I think you probably have all heard that same phrase before, but we aren't necessarily going out looking for that specific spot. I don't want the next morning to be thinking, oh, should have I ran up to the point, or should have ran to the project, or should we ran to Gary? I want to get that out of the way on Friday, because on Saturday morning, I want to be confident in our program, in our location. I also, on Friday, I like to determine, is this going to be a quantity or is this going to be a quality tournament for us? I find it very difficult to try to win the port tournament where you're trying to get your 10 fish or whatever that number may be versus quality for the 333. If we're going to win the 333 port, I'm going to focus. I'm probably going to be in shallower. I'm going to grind it out for just a few king bites that day, and it can be a grind. So
that's one of the really interesting strategy points, I think, when it comes to fishing the port tournament versus focusing on the 333. And I think it's a really awesome event to have that in combination with the port tournament, because really anybody can win if you change your focus. You know, you might get lucky and catch 3 big fish, but I think if you set out, like, you know, let's say you bomb day 1, you know, your strategy for day 2 can be completely different, and you're still fishing for something, you know, and you don't have a huge, you know, cost extra above the port tournament to fish the 333 event. So I think you've mastered that. I mean, you really have. I mean, you've been really dominant in the 333 for several years now. I mean, you've been in contention anyways. So
thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. That, you know, the eliminating water thing. I don't know that a lot of guys take that approach, but you know, if you're pre-fishing and you're spending, you land on a bunch of fish and you stay there all day and catch all of them, you didn't learn anything.
Well, and
I think that's what your point is, right?
It is, and I think it does occur. Specifically down at Michigan City with the reef up there by New Buffalo. I think that reef gets pounded so hard that week leading up to, and I mean, we have 3 tournaments there in a row, and those 3 weeks, that reef just gets pounded. And I've gone up there, we've caught fish, but I usually don't fish it.
Yeah.
So that's the only place that really jumps out to me on the lake that I think there's really overfishing associated with the tournament. As far as that eliminating the water, we're going to catch fish on Friday, regardless of but again, the kids here, it's location. If you're not over the top of fish, you're not going to catch them. It doesn't matter what you're running. These salmon are going to get hungry at some point in that morning, but you got to be over the top of them. Jerry, do you have anything you wanted to add?
We probably take a little bit different approach if we're tournament fishing. I do fish charters, so I've got to produce every day for my customers, and they want fish, and they're not always necessarily interested in the biggest fish, although it's nice, and we look at it as a bonus, but we try to put fish in the boat, as many fish as we can put in the boat every day, because we want happy customers, and at the end of the day, what they really want is to stand in front of a rack of fish. So, you know, probably one of the disadvantages we have over a boat like yours, being faster and smaller, you know, you can run, you know, great distances and do that, where I don't have the time necessarily to do that on a charter because my clients want fish. So so we look at it a little bit differently like that. To me, the big fish typically are a bonus. It's really tough to strategize sometimes for them. Some of our biggest fish, I think, have come more on accident than by actually just targeting them. And typically, the biggest fish will get on with almost always the most inexperienced person at the reel. I mean, that's the way it works on my boat, it seems like. But so yeah, it can be a lot of fun. It can be really exhilarating at times. You know, you're just like trying to, you know, coach them the best you can to get that fish in. But yeah, it's about production for us. I think I've become more of a production fisherman than a single guy. I mean, obviously, if you bomb the first day of the tournament, then the next day you're fishing for 3-3-3. Is how I look at it. To me, unless you get lucky on day one and you get some monsters. But yeah, we definitely we're trying to put quantities in every day to satisfy our customers. Really,
I would say I take a pretty similar approach, and usually I'm not charter fishing around the tournaments. Occasionally we do, but usually not as much. But I'm generally trying to win the port event first and foremost all week. So however many days of pre-fishing I have, I'm really focusing on how am I going to catch my numbers, because I think the ultimate strategy for day one is you have to punch your ticket. If you're a fish or two short on day one, even if you have a good day two, you're probably not going to win. You know, you might not even crack the
3-3-3.
Correct. Yeah. So it all comes down to numbers for me, and you know, I have found that by focusing on the numbers and trying to make sure I catch the tournament limit, oftentimes I'll get one bonus big fish out of that, and then maybe day two looks a little different. But I don't typically target big fish on day one, so I really pre-fishing, I don't necessarily target big fish. I'm just trying to make sure I can catch my fish. And I agree, Matt, totally that, you know, the guys get mad at me sometimes when we're pre-fishing if it's good, like we got to get out of here. We don't need to stay here. Like, we're not learning anything. Yeah. All we're doing is beating on these fish. We need to go. We need to go find something else. Go find plan B, plan C, plan D, whatever that looks like. But don't stay and hammer on the fish that you're hoping that are going to be there tomorrow.
Right. Or sometimes what I'll do is I may on that pre-fishing day, if we land on them first thing, we'll leave and maybe come back 10:30, 11 o'clock and see if they're still there. It's kind of like equate it to if you turkey hunt, putting a gobbler to bed the night before. Same sort of analogy, or you know, you're patterning that big buck with your trail cameras. Similar theory there.
Yeah, I think that, you know, with the king numbers being lower, the last, you know, decade, you have to rely on other species, and you have to rely on not necessarily mature kings to fill your box. So it comes down to, like, Jeremy and I will have conversations like, you know, are we getting enough bites per hour to be able to fill our limit here, or do we need to move? You know, and we'll have that discussion even if we're fishing on different boats. You know, like, how many bites are you getting? Do you think you're going to get, you know, all of your silverfish here, or you know, obviously lake trout do not weigh as much as kings do. So kings are the ultimate fish to put in your box. But if you can't make up the 10 points. Like, you'd need a 50-pound king to beat, you know, 4 2-pound trout. So it doesn't. You have to get the numbers. You know, the guys that, you know, fish amateur like Joe, you know, they have an advantage because they only got to catch 5, so they can spend all day just catching those 5. But, you know, once you step up to the pro division, you got to catch more fish, and you can't waste your time trying to get quality fish when you need the quantity to count the numbers.
I think also, Matt, like you're saying, like, you know, coming back mid-morning, especially in an area with heavy boat traffic, a lot of times that bite will fire again when the boats push out of there. So you'll see us do that a lot of times. Like we're fishing in a heavy traffic area, I might make a pass and then I'm gone. And I'll roll back in there 10:30 and fish the rest of my morning grinding out for 1 or 2 big bites. But at that point, I'm hoping I already have 8 to 10 fish that I can weigh. I'm not still looking for 5 fish coming back at 10:30 in the morning.
And my theory on the whole thing is that most fish, they eat about every 4 hours. So big fish don't magically go to different areas. They, if there's a lot of pressure, they either move in or out or lay on the bottom or whatever they're going to do. But if you can catch fish at 6:30, probably your biggest fish of the day is either going to be the first fish you catch in the morning or one of the first couple, or it's going to be around 10:30, 11 o'clock because they fire back up.
That's us.
And you catch them.
We somehow or another pull a rabbit out of our hat that last hour or two. Somehow or another
But
it happens.
It's hard to run to your trout spot or your offshore spot without giving that, because that first bite could be your biggest fish too. So you're going to get your most bites that first little bit in the morning, and then it all depends how you're sitting. If I'm fishing a 10-fish tournament and I have 7 fish at 8 o'clock, I'm probably going to grind it out. If they're the right fish, if I'm on the right fish, I'll sit there all day and try to get 3 more bites. But if I'm fishing a 10-fish tournament, I'm trying to get 10 bites. I'm not trying to get 25 bites. I'm going to try to get 10 bites. I'm going to make every one of them count.
Yeah.
And if I do, then I have my 10 fish, and they're probably the right ones.
If we get our fish early, then we're just looking for upgrades at that point. Then we'll probably pull out. If we're getting consistently same size fish, we're probably going to pull out of there and look for something different.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the other thing is all these tournaments are different, and all of the strategies are different. According like Ludington, it's 9 and 3, so you have to catch 3 others. You can't catch all kings, you can't catch all lake trout, you can't catch all steelhead. Well, that time of the year in Ludington, the steelhead and the lake trout are miles apart from each other, and sometimes 20 plus miles apart from each other. And so you have to have that all in your plan. And then, if like the northern tournaments up where I'm at, you have Big Point, you have Little Point, you have Point Betsy, and you have to have spots around all of those areas. Any area that you might go to fish, you better have a spot at least on the way home where you can catch trout or catch steelhead or something. You got to have you can't, I don't think that there's enough kings to where you're starting a tournament at 6 in the morning that you're going to deck load 10 kings in the box. You got to plan that you're going to have to catch something else. And depending on, the water temperatures and stuff, a lot of times the trout aren't mixed in with the kings, or maybe the water's too warm where you're catching the kings and you got to slide out for trout, or slide offshore for steelhead or whatever it is. So that's like a lot of strategy for me.
This past season was different strategy wise too, because the trout were not reliable. The trout fishing this season was really, really difficult, I think. I would go to my normal trout spots, and Adam and you and I talked about that, get 3 to 5 bites in multiple hours trying to catch 3 trout. That's not,
that ain't gonna work.
No, you want to catch 3 in 30 minutes,
Yeah.
not 3 in 5 hours. So it was a different year for sure, and I think that's why a lot of the boats that fished offshore this season actually did really well in the tournaments. Historically, I think that's been more of a challenge to go offshore, because the guys staying in and fishing the trout are, even a 9-pound trout, that does pretty well against a steelhead or a juvenile king offshore, and you don't have to run.
Yeah.
So this year was different for sure.
The steelhead offshore, 9 pounds is a big steelhead.
Right.
Offshore, 9 pounds is a normal lake trout.
Yeah.
So, and it's all figuring out those numbers and how it all correlates. But absolutely, you have to catch your fish.
And the other thing you didn't touch on is the weather plays a big factor. If it's, if we got weather coming in, we're probably not going to make as many changes and runs. We want to get our fish, and if we know the weather's going to be coming in a few hours, try to get as many as we can there versus just running all over the lake, because stick and stay and make it pay. That's our motto. Especially if we know we're not going to get the whole day in.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot in tournament fishing. Rarely do you get both days all day.
And that was one of the keys to us winning the Founders Cup last year. We didn't have those weather delays. We had an hour, 2 hours at Saugatuck, I think on Saturday morning or Sunday morning it was. So we were able to fish, and we were able to fish in very favorable conditions for us in a 24-foot center console. We didn't have to really make those decisions if we were going to make that long run and then have to factor pounding back into the waves or not. And I normally I want to fish first thing and deal with the weather at the end of the day. So I always factor that in.
That's a good point, though, too. You're not, if the weather report is calling for winds to come out of the southwest, you're probably not going to run 30 miles north of the port and beat her home. You can. I mean, some guys do, and you have to go 30 miles an hour in the 6-footers and get rocked all the way back to Manistee. But that's only happened once this year.
How bad
I
do you
wasn't
want
driving. But you have to keep that a consideration, especially as boats get smaller and smaller. It becomes more of a consideration. The other bad thing is, in any boats really, but smaller boats, in fact, greater. You want to set up. I always say you want to set up so that you can have a good troll. You don't want to set yourself up to where your troll is like really short, or you have to make massive adjustments. If the wind's coming out of the west, you probably shouldn't set up on the shallow side and get pushed up constantly and be crabbing out. A lot of times it's better to run out to deeper water and then fish that, take it on the corner and fish it in. So a lot of those strategies of just getting a good troll and what can my boat do and how is the wave conditions going to affect my troll? You can have all the right baits in the water and be on a bad troll and not catch anything. So you can have all the wrong baits in the water, be on a great troll and catch fish. So you have to that needs to always be that that direction. I mean, we keep beating on it, but speed and direction and how the weather is going to affect your ability to maintain speed and direction has to be a massive consideration.
One of the things that over the years, and having been around now for pushing 20 years of doing this, when I go to a new port and try to learn a new port, one of the things I do is try to talk to some of the local charter captains and try to figure out what's the weather going to do to the conditions, because it varies very much port to port. And that's something I would recommend, from an audience standpoint is reach out to people, get to know some people from a port if you're going to fish a new location or a new place that you haven't been, and figure out, when the wind blows out of the southwest here at 30 miles an hour, what's it going to do to the current, what's it going to do to the temperature, what's it going to do to the fishing? Because if you spend 3 days pre-fishing and you have a program and then the wind switches 180 degrees, everything is probably going to change, and you need to figure out what that change looks like ahead of time. So that's always a part of my consideration when I'm pre-fishing is I'm looking at the weather a couple of days out, trying to figure out, does this make any sense to stay here and really figure this out and really learn it, or is this all going to change?
Right.
And if you think the weather is going to change the fishing, it probably will. I've learned that. Making a long run somewhere when the conditions have changed, almost every single time, my suspicion that it was going to be bad was correct. So I think you have to trust your instinct and try to get as much information in that pre-fishing period as you can.
And then, everybody kind of shuts down around the tournaments. They don't want to share a lot of information. But I have found, in my experience, that if you get some of these bush lights and you walk down to the boat and introduce yourself with some bush lights, information seems to flow a little bit better. Yeah. I just throw that in there.
And I think with that, if you're trying to network a little bit, I think you're going to have to ask specific questions if you want specific answers. If you just ask, hey, did you fish north? Did you fish south? They may give you a half answer. So
it's the George Freeman.
Yeah.
He calls you up, he'll ask you what color your underwear are. I tell you what, he gets more information than I ever get out of him.
Yeah.
But it's if you ask good questions, you'll get good answers. If you I'm more willing to talk to somebody that asks good questions and give because I feel like I'm going to get they're paying attention to those details. I want to maybe have more communication with that person.
I think the code that we follow is if someone asks you the question, you give them the answer. You tell them the answer. If you're not comfortable giving the answer, you just say, "I'm not comfortable giving you that information." I mean, and then you at least you know where your relationship is with that person, as opposed to giving false information, which is is no good. I mean, that will come back to bite you every single time. And I learned a lesson the hard way years and years ago with friends that I didn't necessarily give them the wrong information. I just didn't give them the information when they asked for it. And it came back to bite me, and it's been ever since then. We've all just kind of agreed on, you ask the question, I'll tell you the answer. If I don't want to tell you, I'm just going to say I'm not comfortable saying that. Yeah. Leave it at that.
Building relationships with people, and you can't do it on the day of the tournament or the weekend of the tournament. It takes years, time, and people you trust that you've shared information with. It's got to be a two-way street because, like you said, if you're giving out false information, they're going to figure it out real quick, and I'll tell you what's going to happen. It's not good. So. But being honest, I find, like you said, I'd rather not tell you something than lie to you. But I've built relationships with people up and down the lake, and some of the best captains, and I find honesty is the best policy.
100%. You could tell someone exactly what you did, exactly where you were. You could give them the GPS coordinates and the base that you ran. They're not going to come and catch a fish. It's never worked out that way. Everyone's really nervous about that, but.
There's so many little things that people don't realize. Even if I told you I'm using this, I got a 36-inch lead, I got it, 75 down, whatever. He's still got to get it done. It can boil down to a difference in swivels, difference in speed. I mean, there's so many little things, difference in so many little things that people don't even think about. Just because I'm trolling at one speed, and I tell you, every boat trolls a little different. Speed I think is critical, and whether or not you're doing knots, whether some boats are reading knots, some boats reading miles per hour, some boats, whether they're using a fish hawk or if they're just using their speed over ground, those are huge, and people tend to just, well, what's your speed? And then, well, was it speed over ground? Was it miles per hour? Was it knots? All those are.
And that's if you call me and say, hey, what are you doing? What's your speed? I'm going to tell you my speed. But if you don't ask what speed it is, I'm not going to just, tell you, oh, well, my fish hawk's down 65 feet, and it's telling me this. But if you ask, is that GPS or is that on your probe? Well, that's my probe. Well, how deep's your probe? What's that, 65 feet? I'll give you the information, but you got to ask for it.
And then it boils down to, is their stuff calibrated right? I mean, I fished on other guys' boats. I'm like, he's like, I can't catch fish. I tell you why, this thing isn't even calibrated. I mean, you don't know where you're at. Well, I go by speed over ground. Well, that's great, but it doesn't tell you what's going on downstairs. But there's a lot of people just take them out of the box, throw them in, and think that's good. And it's not always good.
Yeah, I think you run two probes, or you have a backup probe.
Yeah.
That backup probe, even if you calibrate it, is going to be different than the one you just lost.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, Matt. Like I have two probes on the boat, and I guarantee that my two probes do not read the same thing, even when they're calibrated the same. And so I think the Fishhawk is a great tool, but I think it's a tool to follow the trend of what's going on, where you have it in the water column and what the temperatures are. I think is really important. But I don't really fish off of my Fishhawk per se. I'm more interested in what the Fishhawk is doing related to the speed over ground, because I'm looking for the current and I'm trying to figure out, am I into the current or am I with the current? And that's where I'm getting that information. So, I mean, if I'm getting bit on my Fishhawk at 2.2 at a down speed at 2.2, I'll try to recreate the down speed at 2.2. But I'm more interested in the variation between my surface speed over ground and my Fishhawk speed than anything.
Well, I'd like to, get some questions from the audience that's here with us today. But Matt, I think that talking more about
my pre-fishing
and your small boat stuff, I think that would be great. But I think we'll do that on another episode.
Okay.
So we'll make a whole episode about kind of the different way that you approach things different than the big boats will.
Yeah. And I have a few other points as far as fishing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Too. And one of these, and this might sound silly, but the night before, on Friday night and Saturday night, I'm writing down the lineup of our rods, what we're fishing, what's on it, and then I'll go into this a little bit more, but then Katie and Luke have that. And I'm sure it's the same with some of the pro boats that are fishing. You have a captain and a first mate that's with you all the week. You guys probably already know what you're fishing, but we write it down. That way, there's no communication errors. And we're talking about that on the way to the boat. But it's very simple. Part of our pre-fishing also, if we're struggling, you know, if I don't feel like we're on top of fish, we're going to go back to those historical spots that have worked for us in the past, because I have to be confident in what's happening. If I don't have the confidence, probably not going to happen. And again, as I think Jerry and we've been talking about, is you have to have that plan B, C, and D, depending on weather and wind. And then also part of our pre-fishing, because we're not fishing every day, but we're fishing usually every weekend, and we're careful with our rods and tackle, but we're inspecting those leaders. And somehow or another, I've instilled that into Katie and Luke, and they've become even more fanatical about it than I am. They're finding little nicks or rubs on the leader, and they're quicker to want to change that out than I am even.
I can tell you firsthand, we got burned big time. We were like first place in St. Joe one year, and everything was going our way on day one, and day two we needed one more big fish, and we got it on, and next thing you know, it's fighting a big fish, and the guys know how to fight it, and next thing you know, the line just goes slack. It comes in, we look, and the snap swivel's open, and one of my guys says, "Oh," he says, "Yeah," he says, "we were having trouble with that in Michigan City." I said, "We put all this time and effort into this, and you didn't change out $1 snap swivel because it was just a little bit smaller than the ones we ran on all the rest of the rods, and that cost us big time." So, and the other tip I would have is organization. I mean, you get on some of these guys' boats, and it's just like a pile of this, a pile of that. I mean, and it's tough. I mean, if the more organized you are, the less stressed you are when you go into it on the day. Being ready, having your stuff ready is huge. Just instead of trying to untangle stuff. You know, we've all been there. Don't get me wrong. But I'm telling you, a little bit of organization goes a long ways.
Yeah, that's one of the I think the key things that have, led to some of our success is, agreement 100%, keeping the gear 100%. If you're in doubt, change it out. Like always, like I don't care if it's a 300 copper, you're worried about it, change it. Like if you have any concern, you have to deal with it right then and there. Like we never let something ride. We check leaders every single afternoon before, and I always have the guys check. We check leaders and make sure everything's ready to go actually before we go to dinner, right? Yeah. Because once dinner happens, everyone's tired, everyone's had the sun all day, everyone's had a few bush lights. It tends to go downhill quickly after dinner, and so I try to have everything done in the afternoon, and then and the guys know, like we don't start the bush lights until everything's done. We're ready to go. And then on our boat, everything is very, very well organized. Like everything has a place. Everything goes in its place and goes back, comes out of its place, goes right back to the place. And so you can literally ask me, where is this? I know exactly where every little thing is on the boat. It's not, we're not searching for anything. We always have, and we have the luxury of a bit more space and a bit more storage. So I have a lot of backups. I have backup reels, I have backup rods, I have, backup spools of line. Everything has a backup. Right? So if you need something quickly, you know exactly where it is.
I always say, how at the end of a tournament, how much would you pay for a bite? Right. So if a bite's worth $100, why didn't you change $1 worth of line that is going to lead that bite to not last very long? And the other thing is, big fish and small fish don't normally break you off. Right. The best fish you're going to hook all day is probably one that's going to make something fail. And you just got to stay up on your tackle and check those leaders check leaders. I mean, we retie leaders
all day long.
all day long.
Yep.
I mean, if it's got a nick in it, we retire.
Luke and
It doesn't go back
Kate,
out.
when we're taking that fish out of the net, that's the first thing they're doing is they're feeling that
Yep.
leader. And I guess it's really the same thing you guys are saying is that if I'm doubting if I'm going to change that leader, I go back. Well, will that work on a 30-pound king?
Mm-hmm.
And guess what I'm going to do? The answer would be no. I'm not taking that risk.
No,
I'm
you can't.
changing it, even if it takes me it's an extra minute or two. I want to know that line, that whole rig is good going into the water.
Even, I think people are worst about meat rigs. They're not easy to tie. They're expensive. But at the same point, they catch big fish, and if they fail, if there's a nick in a meat rig, retie it. If you don't know how to retie a meat rig, figure it out.
Yep.
Because it's not that hard, and there's lots of different ways to do it. And but you have to take care of that. I mean, I always tell the guys, like, if you think that you need to show me that to see if you should change it or not, just change it. I don't even need to know. Just change it. It's okay. We have more. Or if I have to go downstairs and 4-footers and retie a meat rig, that's what I do. And whatever. It's not fun, but it has to happen, so it does.
It's not easy when you get seasick, though.
That only happened once in Florida. And if you guys would quit bringing this up, I don't know if you've ever fished in the middle of the night where you can't see anything, but I even tried a bush light to help settle my stomach. Didn't help. Thanks for bringing that up again.
You're welcome.
One time.
Did you have anything else, Matt? You said you had a couple points. And
I think we got them all.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really, really solid information, and coming from a guy who's getting it done out there, so it's good to have you on the show.
All right, well, thanks for tuning in. I hope you picked up some top secrets here on our rotators and kind of how we're rigging them, how we're running them. If you liked what you saw, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Pound the like button. I don't know. I'm so bad at this. Smash that
There you
like
go.
button. There you go. I'll put a little hammer there down. Anyways, hope you enjoyed what you saw. Big shout out to Bush Light and also Capt Chucks for all the support that they give us. Make sure you check Bush Light out and also Capt Chucks. You can check them out online right here. All right, we'll see you next time.